There are people who will tell you that getting older means learning to let go. Let go of control, let go of stubbornness, let go of the idea that you can manage things on your own, and maybe some of that is true. I've let go of plenty. But I want to tell you something I learned at 67 years old, in a house I've owned for 31 years, in a city I know the way I know my own hands. Letting go and being pushed are two different things entirely, and the people who want to push you will always dress it up as love. My name is Walter. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Greensboro, North Carolina, in a neighborhood called Fisher Park, where the houses have front porches and the trees are old enough that their roots have started lifting the sidewalks. I moved here with my wife June when our daughter was 3 years old. June passed 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. From the first symptom to the end was 11 weeks. 11 weeks is not enough time to say everything you need to say to someone you've spent 38 years building a life with. There is no amount of time that would be, but 11 weeks didn't come close. I worked 30 years as a senior underwriter for a regional insurance company. I understand risk for a living. I understand how people misrepresent things to get what they want. I understand fine print. I thought that meant I was the kind of man who wouldn't be fooled. I want you to hold on to that because it matters later. My daughter Renee is 39. She lives about 25 minutes away in Summerfield with her husband Clifton and their 3 kids. Clifton sells medical equipment to hospitals and surgical centers across the Piedmont Triad. He travels 2 weeks out of every month, sometimes more. He is the kind of man who fills a room when he talks, who laughs at the right moments, who makes you feel like the most important person at the table. I used to admire that quality. Now I understand it differently. Renee and I grew closer after June died, the way you do when grief makes 2 people, the only ones left, who remember the same persons the same way. She called every Sunday without fail. She brought food over twice a month and wouldn't let me argue about it. She worried about me rattling around in a 4-bedroom house alone, and I let her worry because I didn't have the energy to convince her I was fine, and honestly, some nights I wasn't sure I was. The tablet arrived on a Saturday in March. Renee brought it herself. Clifton beside her carrying the box, the kids running ahead to the porch the way they always did. It was a high-end device, the kind with a stand built for kitchen counters or nightstands. Clifton had already set it up. He talked fast, the way he always did when he was selling something, and he was always selling something. He said it was a wellness tablet, said it had a medication reminder app, a telehealth connection, a daily check-in feature where I could log how I was feeling, blood pressure readings, sleep quality notes. He said Renee could see the dashboard. He said they'd sleep better knowing I had it. He said the grandkids had recorded a good morning video that would play every day at 7 a.m. I'm not a sentimental man, but that last part got me. He set it up on the kitchen counter in 40 minutes, showed me how to tap the reminders, how to log my readings, how the check-in worked. He was patient, thorough, cheerful. He hugged me on the way out. Renee kissed my cheek and said she loved me. I stood in the kitchen after they left and watched the screen dim to standby, and I felt genuinely taken care of. I used it faithfully for 2 months. The man who changed everything is named Otis. Otis Beaumont, 71, retired electrical engineer, 22 years with the Army Corps of Engineers before he came back to Greensboro. We have been friends since 1987. We met a city planning meeting, of all places, arguing the same side of a zoning dispute. Neither of us won, but we've been close ever since. He lives 6 blocks. We walk together on Tuesday and Thursday mornings when the weather allows, and he has never once been late. He is the most precise person I have ever known. I told him about the tablet on a Thursday walk in May. Showed him the app on my phone, the dashboard where Renee could see my readings. He slowed his pace. He asked who else had access to the check-in notes. I said just Renee, as far as I knew. He asked if Clifton had set it up. I said yes. He asked if the device was registered in my name. I stopped walking. I didn't know. Otis came over that afternoon. He sat at my kitchen counter and worked through the tablet settings with the quiet, methodical focus of a man who spent 2 decades solving infrastructure problems. He didn't say much for the first 15 minutes. When he did speak, he said it carefully, the way you deliver information that cannot be undelivered. He said the device was registered to an account under Clifton's professional email. He said the wellness dashboard wasn't just visible to Renee. He said there was a data sharing agreement buried in the terms of service that authorized the account holder to share logged health data and personal notes with third-party care coordination services. He said the check-in notes, everything I had typed about how I felt, whether I was confused, whether I'd slept, whether I was lonely, were going somewhere beyond my daughter's phone. I sat down on the stool across from him. He said, "Walter, who do you think is reading those notes?" I didn't have an answer. I should have. I spent 30 years evaluating exactly this kind of thing, the fine print, where the real terms live. And I had signed up for a wellness app without reading a single word of the agreement. Because my grandchildren had recorded a good morning video. Because I missed my wife. Because I was tired and I let myself be. That night I drove through Greensboro the long way home. Took Friendly Avenue out past the country club, turned down Benjamin Parkway along the lake. I know every turn of that road. I've driven it so many times that my hands know it without my head. But that night it felt like driving through a place I only remembered from photographs. Something familiar made strange. I didn't call Renee. I didn't say anything to Clifton. I went home and stood in the kitchen looking at the tablet on the counter, its little standby light pulsing once every 3 seconds. I thought about everything I had typed into the check-in notes over 2 months. April 14th had a hard night, kept waking up and forgetting for a moment that June was gone. April 28th, missed my afternoon blood pressure pill, took it with dinner. May 3rd, drove to the wrong Harris Teeter, the one on Battleground instead of Lawndale. Didn't realize until I was in the parking lot. 3 ordinary things. 3 ordinary human things. And I had typed them myself, willingly, into a box I thought was private. The next morning I called Bertram Okafor, my attorney for 16 years. He handled June's estate, helped me update my will afterward, reviewed the deed when I refinanced. He knows my situation as well as anyone outside my family. I called his cell before his office opened, and he answered on the second ring, the way he always does, because Bertram is the kind of man who picks up when a client calls at 7:45 in the morning without asking why first. I met him at his office on Elm Street at 9. I brought the tablet, I showed him the account registration, the data sharing terms Otis had found. The check-in notes going back 2 months. He read quietly. He made notes on a yellow legal pad, in the small, compressed handwriting he's had for as long as I've known him. When he finished, he put his pen down and looked at me. He said, "Has Clifton or Renee mentioned anything to you recently about the future? About finances, about the house?" I thought about it. There had been a conversation in February at Sunday dinner, after the kids were in bed. It had felt like regular family talk, the kind that happens when the table is cleared and everyone's loosened up. Clifton had mentioned that property values in Fisher Park had jumped significantly, that old houses in established neighborhoods were being snapped up fast. He said it would be a shame to let an estate get tangled up in probate when there were ways to plan ahead. Renee had looked at the table while he talked. I had filed it under conversation. I had been wrong. Bertram said, "I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to answer me honestly." I said, "Go ahead." He said, "In the last few months, have you done anything that could be characterized as forgetful or disoriented in front of Clifton?" I thought about the wrong Harris Teeter. I thought about missing that blood pressure pill. I thought about the check-in notes. I said, "Yes, probably. In small ways." He nodded slowly. He said, Then I think you need to understand what this data could be used for. He used the word conservatorship. He explained it the way he explains things clearly, without theatrics. He said the standard approach was to document patterns of confusion, combine that with a financial assessment, present it to a court, and petition to have a guardian appointed for financial and personal decisions. He said it happened to healthy people every year. He said it was easier than most people thought. He said the check-in notes I had been typing for 2 months were a documentation log I had built for someone else. I asked him what I should do. He said, first, do not change your behavior. Do not stop using the tablet. Do not say anything to Renee or Clifton that tells them you know. He said, second, call me before you sign or agree to anything at all. He said, third, we're going to do a few things on our end while you keep things normal on yours. That was the loneliest instruction I had ever been given. Go home, be normal, let them keep watching. I did it. For 3 weeks, I used the tablet the same as always. I typed my check-ins. I logged my readings. Some mornings I made the entries deliberately careful and clear, proof that I was functioning well. Some mornings I said something small and ordinary that could be read either way. Otis had advised me on this. He said, don't give them nothing and don't give them too much. Give them what they're expecting to see. He'd spent 22 years in the Corps, reading the grain of situations before deciding how to move, it showed. The responses came within the first 2 weeks. Renee called on a Wednesday asking if I'd thought about coming to dinner that Sunday. Just family. I said, of course. She said the kids had been asking about me. I said I'd been thinking about them too. My voice was steady. It surprised me. Sunday dinner was at their house in Summerfield. The kids ate early and went to bed. Renee made decaf and brought it to the living room. Clifton sat forward in his chair in a way I recognized immediately. It is the posture of a man who has rehearsed what he is about to say. He talked about how much they loved me. He talked about the readings he'd seen on the wellness dashboard. He mentioned gently that some of my check-ins had been a little concerning. His word, concerning. He talked about how hard it was to watch someone they loved struggle. His word again, struggle. He talked about June, about how much she would have wanted them to step in and help the way families do. When he said her name, he held the pause after it precisely the right amount of time. The pause a man holds when he knows exactly what the name will do to the person hearing it. Then he placed a folder on the coffee table. I looked at Renee. She was looking at the folder. The documents inside were cleaner than I expected. Financial power of attorney, drafted with the language of something that had been reviewed by someone who knew what they were doing. My name at the top, Clifton listed as agent, a cover letter framed as a starting point, something to look at together, no pressure, just planning. He said it was just to make things easier. He said they could set up a meeting with a financial advisor who specialized in elder planning. He said it all with that particular warmth he carries, the warmth that makes you feel like you're being cared for even when you're being managed. I took my time with each page. I told him I'd need to read it carefully. I told him I'd been meaning to update a few things with Bertram anyway, and maybe I could bring it to him. Clifton said, of course. Of course. He was relaxed in the way of someone who believes the outcome is already set. I called Bertram from my car in their driveway before I backed out. Bertram said, that's what we needed. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at Bertram's office downtown. It was described to Renee and Clifton as a routine estate review, a chance to sit down together and make sure everything was current. Bertram chose the language carefully. Clifton accepted without hesitation, which told me how certain he was. I want to tell you what it felt like to walk into that conference room, knowing what was coming. My hands were steady. I hadn't expected that. I thought I'd feel the anger in my shoulders, in my jaw, the way I used to feel it on job sites when a situation had gone wrong and someone was going to have to answer for it. But I walked into that room and I felt the particular calm of a man who has identified the problem and is holding the solution in his hands. Just the work to do. Bertram's conference room overlooks South Elm Street. Good morning light. Long table, 6 chairs. Renee came in first and hugged me, and her eyes didn't quite meet mine. Clifton came in second, leather portfolio under his arm, sharp as always. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has already decided how a meeting ends. He was wrong about that. Bertram opened with formalities. Then he placed a printed report on the table. He said a licensed digital forensics consultant had examined the wellness tablet and its associated account. He said the account was registered to a business entity connected to Clifton's professional address. So, he said the data sharing terms of the app, buried in Section 14 of the user agreement, authorized the account holder to share health status notes with a third-party elder care placement service. He named the service. He slid the second document forward, the consultant's report alongside a statement from the placement service's own privacy disclosure, confirming the data pathway. Clifton said, "That's a standard care coordination feature. A lot of people use it." Bertram said, "Your name is on the account, not your father-in-law's. He never consented to external data sharing because he didn't know the account existed in his name." Clifton shifted. His composure was good. I'll grant him that. He recalibrated quickly, moved to a different framing. He said he'd only been trying to help. He said he'd been watching me struggle. He said he'd seen things that concerned him. He used the check-in notes to make his case, read a few of them aloud, the wrong pharmacy, the missed pill, the mention of June. His voice stayed even. He sounded, genuinely, like a worried son-in-law. And then Bertram placed the folder on the table, not Clifton's folder, the one Bertram had assembled. He said, "We obtained records from the Guilford County Register of Deeds office. There was a title search initiated on this property in February, 3 weeks after the property value conversation at Sunday dinner. The search was requested by a real estate attorney whose office shares a building with a company Clifton is a partner in." He said it the way Bertram says everything, evenly, without inflection, like he's reading a weather report and letting the facts carry the weight. Clifton said, "That's not what it looks like." Bertram said, "There is also an email." He slid a printed page across the table. I won't describe the exact words, but the meaning was plain. The email was to the Elder Care Placement Service from the account connected to Clifton, asking whether the check-in log data would be sufficient to support a capacity evaluation request and how long the documentation period needed to be before filing. The room held that for a moment. Renee put both hands flat on the table. Clifton said, "That email is being taken completely out of context." He said it evenly. He said the whole situation was a misunderstanding, that I had manipulated this, that I was a proud man who didn't know how to accept help, that Renee had been worried about me for 2 years, that he'd only been trying to protect his wife and her family. His voice stayed measured the entire time. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. He looked at Renee when he finished. He needed her. He needed her to say something. She was his foundation in that room and he knew it. Renee looked at her hands. Then she looked at me. She said, "Clifton," just his name. "Nothing else." He stopped. Bertram said, "We'll be in contact with your attorney regarding the unauthorized account registration, the data sharing without consent, and the title search initiated without the property owner's authorization." He said it cleanly, without enjoyment. He was not theatrical about it. He was simply clear. There was no dramatic scene. Clifton stood up, gathered his portfolio, and said something about speaking with his own counsel before anything else. He said it like a man maintaining his composure as a professional courtesy to himself. He walked out first. Renee sat for another moment. She did not look at me when she left, but at the door she stopped with her hand on the frame. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I stayed behind with Bertram. He asked me how I was. I said I was all right, which was true in the way that things are true when you've spent weeks getting ready for something and the something is finally over. He said I'd handled it well. I told him I'd had good people around me. When I walked out to the parking lot on South Elm, the late morning heat hit me the way southern heat does in June, like stepping into something you can't quite push through. I stood beside my car and looked up at the building and thought about Clifton sitting at my kitchen counter setting up that tablet. 40 minutes, patient, thorough, cheerful, telling me the grandkids had recorded a good morning video, which they had. He'd use that too. I said out loud to no one, "You should have just sent a card." Then I drove home. Renee called 4 days later. She called from her own cell, not the house line, which told me she'd stepped somewhere private to make the call. She cried for the first several minutes, and I let her. When she could talk, she said she hadn't known about the title search. She hadn't known about the data sharing agreement. She hadn't known about the email. She said she had believed Clifton when he said he was worried about me. She said she had been scared, the same fear that followed her since June died, the fear of losing me too, and that Clifton had known exactly how to speak to that fear. She said, "Dad, I'm sorry, I don't have a better word for it. I'm just sorry." I told her I believed her. I still do. But belief and trust are not the same thing, and trust takes longer to rebuild than either of us would like. We're working on it. Some things don't have a schedule. You show up and do the work and try not to keep a ledger. Within 2 weeks of the meeting, I changed every password and account PIN I held. I worked with Bertram to update my estate documents, designated a trustee with no connection to Clifton, and added a durable power of attorney provision that requires a second signature from someone Clifton has never met. I put things in place that I should have had in place years ago. Bertram told me what I already knew but needed to hear said out loud, which is that most people have not protected themselves because they have never had a reason to think they needed to. Most people trust the people around them. That is not a flaw, but it is the exact place where vulnerability hides. Otis came over for dinner on a Friday evening about a month after the meeting. He brought biscuits from Price's Chicken Coop, which is the only acceptable biscuit in Greensboro. And I fried catfish the way June taught me. And we ate at the dining room table with the windows open and the ceiling fan running the way we used to do in summer years ago. He said, "You know what the hardest part of all of this is? Not what they did." He picked up his glass. "The hardest part is that you had to spend 3 weeks performing the version of yourself they expected to see. That stays with you." He was right. There is a cost to that. Not a visible one, nothing that shows from the outside. But when you walk through your own house acting a part for a camera that someone else controls, some residue of that stays. You wash your hands of it, but something is still there in the quiet moments. The tablet is gone. I don't use anything in this house that someone else registered in their name. I know that sounds like a man who's become suspicious of the world, and maybe I have, a little. But I have good deadbolt locks, a phone I trust, and 30 years of experience reading documents before I sign them. I should have applied that experience sooner. That part is on me. Here is what I will leave you with, because you deserve the honest version after you've sat with me through all of this. At 67, I thought the sharp dangers were behind me. I had outlasted them. I had built the house, raised the child, buried my wife, and come out the other side still standing. I thought what was left was the long, quiet stretch, the maintenance years, the slow and decent close of a life I had made with my own hands. What I learned is this. The quiet stretch is when some people start watching. They watch what you've built. They watch how you move through your days. They watch what you miss, what you forget, what you say when you're grieving and not thinking about how it sounds. And they wait for the right moment to call that watching care. If someone in your life has offered to help you manage your health, your finances, your routines, and something about the offer feels slightly too organized, slightly too complete. Like someone has already thought several steps ahead of you. Trust that feeling. Get a second opinion from someone who has no stake in the answer. Have your own attorney look at anything you're asked to sign. And if a device enters your home that someone else set up, find out whose name it's registered under before you type a single word into it. You have spent a lifetime building what you have. The right to make decisions about it is not a burden to be lifted from you. It is yours. And the people who love you, the ones who actually love you, won't need your signature to prove it. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. If something in this story felt close to home, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stay sharp, stay steady, and take good care of yourselves out there.